today we are going to be doing a meal prep that involves pulled pork, mac and cheese, and baked beans because I am going to sort of a summer potluck with friends out in a park. And so we're all just bringing various foods. And so I figured this would be a good option because with the pulled pork, I'll have plenty left over, but you can make it on, you can put it on sandwiches, you could put barbecue sauce on it, you could mix it with the mac and cheese, you could do all sorts of things with it. I figured it would be a really good meal because people could do a lot of different things. And I think most people will like it. And then we also have mac and cheese, so it's more a vegetarian option as well, along with the baked beans, although the baked beans will have some bacon in them. But we're going to be starting off with the pulled pork recipe. And with the doing this one first is because I'm doing it in the slow cooker and I'll need to cook it on low for at least 6 hours. So I kind of just want to get that all going first here. So then the first step of this pulled pork recipe is you're just supposed to trim some of the excess fat off it. And it does say to cut it into 4 pieces. So I'm going to try to take it out of this bag without spilling too much of the juice. I did try to drain it a little bit, but that was hard. Okay, so I'm just going to start by trimming the fat off here. I've never actually made pulled pork before, but it's something I've always eaten and enjoyed. So I thought that this would be the perfect opportunity to give it a try because, as you can see, the smallest cut of meat I could find was 6 pounds. So it's going to make quite a lot of pulled pork. But the great thing is, from what I was reading, is that it's really easy to freeze it. So if I have leftovers and we don't want to eat it, we're sick of pulled pork, can just throw it in the freezer. Because I'm not going to be putting barbecue sauce on. I will bring barbecue sauce, so if people want to put it on their pulled pork, they can. But you can also just eat it as is as well. Okay, so the recipe says to cut this in 4s if you're using 4 pounds. Smallest size I could find is 6. I think it's mainly just to get it in so you can get it in the crock pot because that's how I'm going to cook it. And so it cooks a little faster, so it has more surface area. So I'm going to try to do that as best I can. Okay, so I've cut it up to the best of my ability. There is a bone in here, so I'm just going to leave it. And we'll see how that goes. So the next step is just to rub all the spices on the outside of the pork. So the spices that I have all mixed up here are chili powder, onion powder, garlic powder, cumin, salt, and pepper, as well as some brown sugar. I'm just going to work on coating all the surfaces of the pork. Okay, so I got all the spices added, rubbed all over the pork. It ended up being basically the perfect amount to cover all of the surfaces. So then the next step before I kick this off is just to add the Coke and then set this on low and cook it for at least 6 hours. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that all set, and we'll see you back here when we start the mac and cheese. Now that the pork is in the slow cooker, I'm going to move on to the mac and cheese recipe. So I started my water boiling here, and I'll dump those noodles in as soon as that comes to a full boil. I also added a tablespoon of salt to it. And like while we're waiting for that, I'm going to start working on the cheese sauce. So the first step in making this sauce recipe is to melt our butter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. And the reason this butter is so far away is to make sure Miss Fuji does not grab it. Okay, add that. And I've never made this mac and cheese recipe before. I'm cautiously optimistic. I sort of combined a couple different recipes because I feel like whenever I make mac and cheese, it's never as good as what you get in a restaurant or even some of like the frozen Stouffer's meals. So I did some research to try to see what makes that creaminess for the mac and cheese. And unfortunately, it seems like it's a lot of emulsifiers like sodium citrate. This is boiling, so I'm just going to go ahead and dump in our water, dump in our pasta, which I think are not the best for you. So I try to avoid things like that when I'm cooking, but in this case, it's kind of a one-off thing. I'm just gonna give it a go and see how it turns out. Okay, so the butter is basically melted, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the flour. And I'm gonna whisk that continuously for 1 or 2 minutes until it's golden. Okay, now I'm gonna start adding my milk 1 cup at a time. And with this mac and cheese recipe, I chose to use whole milk, but there's also recipes out there where you do a combination of whole milk and cream, and so it's kind of up to you how creamy you want your mac and cheese. All right, so that's all the milk that's been added. And then we just are gonna bring this to a boil. I brought the milk mixture to a boil, and then I turned it down to medium heat, and now I'm just gonna leave it on medium heat and whisking it occasionally until it gets to the thickness of about a heavy cream. The milk mixture, I've been whisking it and on medium heat for about 5 minutes, just a little bit shy of that. And it looks like it's thickened up pretty nicely here. We don't want it too thick at this point. So really then my next step is just combining it with our cheese mixture. So in this case, I am using a cheddar cheese and Velveeta. And then also I'm going to stir in our spices, which is a mustard and a ground cayenne, along with some salt and pepper. So, and like I mentioned before, it seems like the key to having a really creamy mac and cheese is having some of those emulsifiers, specifically sodium citrate. And that's why we're using Velveeta in this recipe, because that has some natural sodium, well, not natural, has some added sodium citrate to it. And so that will kind of act as the stand-in emulsifier, and without me having to add it. But in terms of other cheese, so cheddar is pretty traditional in terms of a mac and cheese, but you can use a bunch of other cheese as well. Like you can use Gruyere or Jarlsberg, has a nice nuttiness to it. There's a lot of recipes that include some Parmesan. It kind of just depends on what sort of cheese you like and sort of how dimensional you want that flavor. And so I just added the mustard and the cayenne, and so that should give it sort of a nice, the mustard should give it a little bit of tanginess. Like I said, there's so many different varieties and how you can do the mac and cheese. Um, I kind of like adding that little bit of depth of flavor. So, but that is when I was looking at recipes, is something that's optional. All right, the final step is, now that we have all that sauce that's all come together, the last step of this recipe is just combining the pasta and the sauce together in the dish. You could probably pour the pasta into the sauce as well, mix it, and then just pour it in here, but I think whatever will work. And with this pasta, I chose like the macaroni elbows. You could use a different pasta shape if you prefer that. It doesn't really matter. I feel like these are kind of traditional for mac and cheese, but I do like some of the mouthfeel of the other pastas a little bit more, but this will be delicious. Adding this cheese sauce, and when I tasted it, it was so creamy and good, and I really do actually like adding the cayenne to it. I feel like that just gives it, it doesn't make it too spicy, but it gives us like the faintest kick, so it's not just like a boring cheese sauce. But I really like it. I think this is going to be really good. Okay, so I'm just going to mix this together. Just make sure it's all well incorporated. And if you wanted to, since like I mentioned, I'm bringing this to sort of a picnic, potluck sort of thing, I'm deciding to do it in this glass cookware because I have a lid. It's easy for me to transport this. But if you wanted to make cleanup really easy, you could get one of those metal aluminum foil disposable tins. They aren't really that expensive, but then you could just cook it in that, keep it in that, and then just bring it on. And then when you're done, you could just throw it away if you had no leftovers. And if you wanted to meal prep and freeze this, which you could also do, because I was thinking about making these ahead of time, just throwing them in the freezer, that would make it really easy as well. Okay, Poochie, can you back it up? Back it up. No, that's not for you. Okay. Okay, and just like that, it came together so fast. I think it's going to be a hit. But I'll let you know how it tastes once it's done baking. Oh, Fuji! Hey, 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 hey. We already know it was one, at least one person liked it. Okay, so while the mac and cheese is cooking in the oven, I have started on the baked bean recipe. So the first step of the baked bean recipe is just to cook up your bacon. I think you're supposed to cut it before you cook it, but I hate doing that. So I have just decided I'm going to cook it in the pan and then cut it afterwards. So I'm just waiting for that all to cook up real quick. And I decided to use this pan because I already used it to boil the pasta earlier. So instead of getting a new pan dirty that may be slightly better suited for this recipe, I'm just going for it in this pan. So and then once the bacon is done cooking, I'm going to use this pan as well to cook the cook the onions and the red peppers, because we're going to cook them in some of that bacon fat just to add a little bit of extra flavor to them as well. So, and with the baked beans, you definitely don't have to put bacon in them. I'm deciding to put bacon because we had actually somehow fortuitously the exact right amount of bacon left over. Oops, that's the mac and cheese. We had the exactly right amount of bacon left over, so I figured may as well just cook it up and include it in the baked bean recipe as a way to get something out of the fridge and not let it go to waste. So just gonna wait for these to cook. Since the mac and cheese just dinged, I am going to take that out of the oven and see how that's looking. The mac and cheese is looking really great. I just put it out. You can see it's starting to bubble, but it hasn't really quite browned yet. You definitely don't have to let it brown, but I'm just going to let it cook a little bit longer since I started off by only cooking it for the minimum amount of time. I just put it in there for 20 minutes. So I'm just going to cook it just a little bit longer, and then we'll see how that looks. So I think the mac and cheese is done. So I'm going to take it out, take a look at it. Okay, excuse me. Can you back it up, little lady? Excuse me. Okay, beep, 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 beep. Oops. Excuse me. She does not want to move. Okay, I think that's all set. That mac and cheese smells so good. I'm excited to try it in a little bit here, but I need to take care of my bacon. Just trying to make sure the bacon gets pretty crispy. I feel like that's kind of how I like it in the baked beans. All right, I think it's pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and take it off and put it on this paper towel that I have here. This recipe calls for about half an onion, so I cut up a little bit extra and I'll use that in something else, and half a red pepper. I'm just going to add a little bit of extra olive oil since there wasn't like a ton of bacon grease in there. And I cut this onion and this red pepper up pretty small, not like a very fine dice, but sort of medium, because I just don't want the chunks to be too big. I don't want them to be sort of noticeable in the beans. I feel like there's a lot of varieties. Like you could probably cut them smaller than I did, probably cut them a little bit bigger than I did, but you can do whatever sort of your preference is here. Okay, I'm just gonna let those cook until they soften. The onions and peppers are cooking nicely, and it smells so good cooking in the bacon grease. And the one thing I want to say about this recipe too is this is kind of a combination of a bunch of different recipes that I saw on the internet as well. Growing up, I had this, I think it was like Captain Ken's baked beans. Um, and it was a very sort of like tangy, molassesy type baked beans. So I was trying to kind of recreate that a little bit as well. So that's sort of what I was going for with this recipe. So we'll see if it lives up to that. All right, everything has softened nicely. So then the next step of my recipe is just to add a whole bunch of the spices and the beans into the pot. So I'm going to do that. The beans, which have been drained and rinsed a little bit, and then all of my spices, which includes garlic powder, mustard, and then I'm going to add in the brown sugar, the ketchup, the molasses, which I made a huge mess of that. I need about 2 teaspoons of yellow mustard. I'm just going to kind of eyeball that. Okay, and then I'm going to mix all those together and bring that to a simmer. The other thing that you can add to this recipe is vinegar, and that's optional. I'm going to add some vinegar because, like I mentioned, I really do like sort of the tanginess of baked beans. And I'm just going to add that vinegar. Ooh, and this smells so good. I can smell that little tanginess that comes from the mustard and the vinegar, and I can smell a little bit of the sweetness from the brown sugar and that depth of flavor that the molasses is going to add to it. So I'm just going to let this come to a simmer. Just going to give it a little try. That actually is really good. I'm trying to figure out if it needs anything else because it tastes, flavor's really good, but it's not quite the same as Captain Ken's, the baked beans I really liked as a kid. So, but I mean, it'll be hard to reproduce that. All right, just going to add the bacon back in. All right, so now I'm just going to transfer it into the pan so I can cook it in the oven. Okay, and just like that, you can see it's all come together really nicely. So I'm just going to pop that in the oven. Please move. Excuse me. Boop, boop. All right, so it's been about 2 hours since I started the pork. I actually decided to move it on high just to speed up the process a little bit. So I was just going to check in on it, see how it's going. Since the mac and cheese is done and the beans are in the oven, so we're all set there. So I just wanted to see how everything was going here. It smells amazing. And you can definitely smell the cumin and all those spices. You can definitely see it starting to cook. So it's looking really good. So I think my plan is to probably cook it a little bit longer on high, rotate it so that pork that's kind of in the air and not in any of the water gets, or in the Coke, gets submerged, and then keep cooking it. All right, so the mac and cheese is out of the oven, the baked beans are out of the oven. I ended up cooking them for about 40 minutes because I like my baked beans not super soupy, so I wanted to really kind of get that excess liquid off. The pulled pork is still going. That's to be expected. It'll probably take a couple more hours, but I figure I'm just going to go ahead and taste these real quick to see how they are. Mm. Mm. Those baked beans are really good. They're, I would say, on the sweet side for baked beans, which I'd say, with baked beans, there's like a wide range of what they're going to taste like. But these have like a really nice depth of flavor as well. I like the little chunks of bacon that you get. I like the red pepper and the onion in them. They're really good. Mm. Yep. And the mac and cheese, I actually tried a little bit of this already because I couldn't hold back, but mm, that is so good too. It's so creamy. It actually reminds me a lot of Stouffer's in a good way. I ate a lot of that as a kid, not so much anymore, but it just has that sort of really comforting richness to it that is really good. And together, they're excellent. I can't wait until the pulled pork is ready to try. So just finished the pulled pork and shredded it up and tasted it, and it is so good. Ended up cooking it for about 6-ish hours, I think, on the slow cooker. And that was like I started at high and then moved it to low partway through. I did temp it just to make sure it got up to the right temperature. So that really brings us to the end of our video today. Everything came together so quickly, so easily. It was super delicious. So I'd highly recommend all 3 of these recipes, which you can check out links in the description below if you're interested in making them. And if you do make them, it'd be great if you could let us know in the comments. I really hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.